Michael. Oh, thank you so much, and thank you so much for coming today. Welcome to the New York State Bar Association's Women in Law section, Women's History Month celebration. Today, we are very proud to kick off our very first Trailblazers program, featuring the New York Attorney General, Letitia James. The mission of the Women in Law section is to be an active voice and catalyst for change, to advance women in the profession and all women under the law. I want to thank our hosts today, Dentons, in particular Ron Hedges, Sandra Hauser, Sal Imperator, and Jonathan Walker. I would also like to thank and recognize Gail Gottbauer, who was very instrumental, member of our section, for reaching out to Dentons on our behalf. This program would not be possible without the leadership of our program chairs, Laura Sulam and Cheryl Galler. Laura and Cheryl. And our member at large, Justice Tanya Kennedy. Thank you so much. And all of our executive team members. We are really delighted to have everybody join us today. And now I'm going to turn the program over to a very special person, the New York State Bar President, Michael Miller, who has been an uber champion for our new section. Michael Miller has really supported the work for this section, including the formation of our section, which happened just this year. We were a committee of just 50, and we mushroomed to hundreds of members now. And our recent participation in the New York State Legislature's sexual harassment hearings, support for our section's memo on constitutional equality, or the ERA, with his executive committee, and as well as numerous initiatives. Michael?
Well, Susan, thank you so much for that generous introduction. I'm looking at all of you, and there was a debate about whether there was a need for the Women in Law section. We had a committee. The maximum number you could have on a committee is 50, and folks said, you really don't need a Women in Law section, or some folks said you don't need it because we don't have sections that aren't dedicated to particular areas of law. And then I pointed out, we do have a young lawyers section, so why not a Women in Law? And they said, well, people aren't going to join. Well, you've proven them wrong, and I'm very pleased to be here this evening. It's my honor to be a part of this extraordinary event, and it's extraordinary for many reasons. First, we have the remarkable Tish James, the first African-American, first woman elected Attorney General of the state of New York. And of course, this is just one milestone in a life of milestones. And I'm going to go out on a limb. I would not be surprised if in a few years there's another milestone. You know, Governor James, it kind of rolls off the tongue.
Michael, go back to your notes.
So I honestly can think of no one better suited than Attorney General James. That sounds good too, doesn't it? Sounds great. To present the inaugural lecture in the Women in Law section's Trailblazer series. And the other reason I think this is remarkable, the section itself, I'm very proud that the very first personal agenda item at my very first executive committee that I chaired in June was the establishment of the Women in Law section. And I am the very first member of the section. And in a mere 9 months, in a mere 9 months, the Women in Law section has become one of the State Bar's most vibrant, active, and important sections. And in your this section has brought an enormous, I feel like it's my progeny. It's really a very special, you've got nearly 750 members, participation in the Me Too panel. The participation in the Me Too panel at our annual meeting, Presidential Summit, was really extraordinary. We devoted an entire issue of the State Bar Journal to women in the law and issues related to women in the law. You've had eye-opening programs on passing the Equal Rights Amendment. We had an executive committee special conference call just a few weeks ago to endorse pursuing the Equal Rights Amendment here in New York State, and that was really Susan's doing. She's been the driving force. What a fantastic inaugural chair you have been, Susan. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank you for your generosity of spirit. I'm referring to your Champions Committee, which engages men as partners because, we deserve a seat at the table too, just like you do. And in all seriousness, I believe, somebody earlier thanked me for my support of the Women in Law section. I didn't do it for you. I did it for us. We are better when everybody that deserves a seat at the table has the opportunity to be there. So I thank you for your involvement in the New York State Bar Association, for your participation in the Women in Law section, and Governor James, I look forward to your remarks.
Thank you so much. My goodness. Thank you so much. Let's move. Oh. I was ready.
We still have some more welcome to do for you. So I'm Sandy Hauser. I'm from Denton's. I'm the chair of our litigation group here in New York, and I welcome all of you. It is really an honor to welcome the section, and particularly Attorney General James, who was here once before, about 2 years ago, speaking on a program encouraging women to run for public office. So appropriate, and we knew then what we know now, that she was destined, even as fabulous public advocate, she was destined for higher office, and I don't know why you are stopping at governor and talking about the ambition. So it's an honor to welcome you here, such a tireless and effective advocate for social and economic justice. Think about what you've done over the last couple months, even today, standing up for those who are in rent-stabilized homes, and your tireless work on behalf of medical care and access to medical services and family planning services for women is just extraordinary. And on just about every issue I can think of, from affordable housing to criminal justice to voter access, it is just an honor to have you as our Attorney General, and to welcome you here. And I'm going to turn it over for a formal introduction to.
Thank you so much.
Get it.
Thank you so much.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Justice Tanya R. Kennedy, and I'm honored to say that I have known tonight's speaker for over 15 years.
Oh,
and that
goodness.
was through our membership with the Metropolitan Black Bar Association. So what I am not going to do, I'm not going to really talk about what you know already. I'm going to speak more personally. Tonight's speaker is a prolific and dynamic orator who speaks truth to power, a fearless, bold individual who is not afraid to provide a voice to the voiceless, an advocate for equal justice for all, a tireless servant in her community and church, a people's person who has her finger on the pulse of the human condition and follows in the footsteps of one of her mentors, the late Shirley Chisholm, as being unbossed and unbought. And lastly, a trailblazer. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in for a real treat as tonight's speaker will impart her pearls of wisdom as a trailblazer and give us the lessons of leadership. I'm pleased to present tonight's trailblazer, the first woman of color to hold statewide office in New York and the first woman to be elected Attorney General, the Honorable Letitia Tish James.
Thank you. That was appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Justice Kennedy. I really appreciate that. And thank you to Michael Miller, who is a feminist in his own right. I want to thank him for all that he is doing. I really appreciate those kind remarks. They say that AG stands for aspiring governor. But it's interesting because, I was in Albany yesterday. As you know, I'm sure all of you have read about, we've issued some civil subpoenas against certain banks. And there was a tweet yesterday or this morning, and the tweet actually attributed the subpoenas to the governor. And I was offended. I was really offended. He can't even get, the Attorney General correct. I was really upset. And then at 5 o'clock or about 4 o'clock this afternoon, he tweeted one with me, and I'm so proud. It's an honor. I was looking forward to that. I was looking forward to the name that he was going to give me, because that's when you know you made it. And in fact, yesterday I was in Albany. I was in Albany for a couple of reasons. I was in Albany, one, to talk about my budget with the governor of the state of New York. Two, there is a bill that will be passed in the coming days and or weeks on double jeopardy, to close the double jeopardy loophole. And three, to talk about my legislative agenda, which includes, again, passing that pardon loophole, into the Martin Act, making sure the statute of limitation is extended to 6 years as opposed to 3. And initiatives focusing on protecting immigrants who are being unfortunately evicted, and bad landlords who take advantage of loopholes in the law, a consumer rights initiative, and other initiatives. And so I wanted to speak to the legislature and talk to them about my legislative agenda. So it was a great opportunity yesterday. We got a lot accomplished. And today I started my day at a press conference, as most of you know, on the Lower East Side, where a landlord is using the bankruptcy law to evict over 25 families. Families who've been on a rent strike for some time because he's denied them heat and hot water, and the conditions are just deplorable. So this is an area which has never been used before, where a landlord basically goes into to bankruptcy court to basically vitiate 25 leases that are protected by the rent stabilization law. It's the first of its kind. I partnered with the state and the city today, and we were a united voice against efforts to use the bankruptcy court to evict individuals. As you know, in the Lower East Side, it's a hot real estate market, and there's all these luxury buildings in and around this townhouse, which houses 25 families, primarily Mexicans, and they were out there with their children, and this is a place they call home. It's really critically important that individuals like that know that government is there to serve them, particularly at a time when there's been this campaign of terror against immigrants. It's important to know that government is there for them as well. So thank you for inviting me. I don't know about this Trailblazer stuff. I just know that I believe in public service. I just know that public service, unfortunately, has gotten a bad rap recently. I just know that I wake up each and every day with a fire in my belly to transform the world, to make a difference in someone's life, and to serve individuals without a voice, and those individuals who are locked out of the sunshine of opportunity, and to raise the hopes and expectations and the dreams of individuals, and let people know that someone like me who came from humble beginnings can make it. And if I can make it, then anyone can make it, and that there shouldn't be any bars between you and success. And that education really is the key to success. Education is the key to overcome all isms. And that if you study, you work hard, you can achieve your dreams. Who I am. Everyone, I'm not used to everyone calling me general. It feels kind of strange. I'm just Tish. I'm from Brooklyn. Yay, woo! I'm pretty much a down-to-earth individual. I don't believe all of my press releases. So good evening, everyone. First, let me thank Denton's, Susan Harper, the chair of the New York State Bar Association's Women in Law section, Mr. Miller, Sandra Hauser, partner in Denton's New York office, and of course, my good friend Justice Tanya Kennedy, the New York County Supreme Court. Thank you for your commitment to understanding how important it is to give women in law a platform to express themselves and to learn from one another. We all know that there are far too few women in the law and far too few partners. And so I am always eager to jump at the chance to share my experience with other women who understand what it's like to often be ignored and overlooked. And in fact, speaking of partners in the law, I will be discussing the lack of diversity at some of the major law firms in the city and across the state shortly. The lack of women partners, the lack of individuals of color who have become partners, and the policies which unfortunately serve as a bar to the advancement of women and people of color in the city and the state. As was said, I'm not afraid to speak truth to power, and I'm not afraid to talk about my position and my philosophy and my political philosophy based on the facts and based on evidence and based on data. And it's really critically important that we do a better job at promoting women and people of color at these major firms, particularly since a number of these firms rely upon city and state and federal contracts. So I want to thank all of you for your commitment. I, like so many, have come from humble beginnings. My career in government has been filled with fierce challenges and unexpected joys and unimagined opportunities. There have been those who've tried to question my credentials, who've tried to test my commitment, and who've tried to hold me back and tear me down. But despite all of that, all my life, I've held on to the idea that no one is above the law. No one is below the law. And my sense of purpose stems from the notion that you should be treated no worse than your neighbor to your left, and no better than your neighbor on the left. And it stems from this belief that the law can and should be used to protect and defend the vulnerable and the voiceless, and that the law must be viewed as an instrument for change. See, I'm in the justice business. I believe in correcting wrongs. I believe in standing up for individuals, and I believe in organizing people, and I believe in joining with other disenfranchised groups, just standing together as one and recognizing that the artificial constructs that people create between you and I really are no moment, because what we share are basically the same principles and the same values. And that's why it's an honor and privilege to serve as the Attorney General of the state of New York, because all of that is embodied in our law. Now is the time more than ever, at a time when we find ourselves in this country more divided than ever, to use the power of the law to recognize that we're all in this together and that there's so much at risk, that we've got to join together, we've got to stand together, and we can't be separated anymore. We've got to move mountains and stand up together, stand on behalf of our beliefs and our values as Americans. And it's so critically important that we do that. And there have been quite a few times in my life, both professionally and personally, where I've looked to Shirley Chisholm to be the guiding force, and I've looked to Barbara Jordan as well. Shirley Chisholm, as was mentioned, was unbought. She was unbought, and she didn't give a damn about what anyone thought of her. She embodied positive self-esteem. She was fearless and had this strength. Remains a case study in courage. She was an immovable force powered by her conviction in her work and her belief in herself. She was a rare kind of politician who cared about doing what was right, not what was politically expedient. Now, oftentimes, I don't refer to myself as a politician. That, has a negative connotation. I'm just someone who believes in public service, who believes in justice, and that really is what moves me. I'm a Libra at heart, and I have these scales of justice. And when my scales of justice are off, I get kind of crazy. And usually it moves me to organize and rally some individuals who are like-minded, and or to look at the law and to see what we can do to correct things, and to correct history. And so, like Shirley Chisholm, she was a Brooklyn native, and it's humbling to carry that torch, and it's a privilege that I never take for granted. And as the first Black woman ever elected to Congress and the first woman, period, to ever run for president on the Democratic ticket, well, then we do have another candidate of color who's running for president these days. Shirley Chisholm shattered ceilings with her determination and her compassion for others. And for all of those reasons and many more, I have decided to model my approach to justice after her. And one of her favorite quotes of all times is one where she says, if they don't give you a seat at the table, then you should bring a folding chair. And I'd like to think that I've taken that to heart, as I have brought plenty of folding chairs to rooms, or sometimes I've just stood up and just announced myself and said, I am here to represent X or Y, and it's time that we get some change. And I'd like, it's not simple, and it's not really simple, not really simply about being the first African-American woman, the first woman ever, because in fact, I know a lot of firsts, and I know a lot of elected officials. I know, and some of them, unfortunately, don't do much. For me, the question is really, what do you do with this title? What do you do with being first? What do you do with being the first Attorney General of color? What do you do with being the first woman of color? What do you stand for? What change will you affect? What do you stand for as a person? Titles mean nothing to me. I met some of the most intelligent individuals in humble homes, public housing, people who've come to this country seeking freedom and opportunity, who say to me, well, Tish, the Statue of Liberty, it says this, why are we not welcomed? Or Tish, I read a book and it said, they talked about democracy and they talked about your constitution of this country. Why can I not be a citizen now? Or Tish, why can't my child attend this particular school? Thought this country was about opportunity. Why is there a requirement that I be this or that? And sometimes it's difficult to explain, but it's important that you explain and that you try to get them to understand anyhow. You see, because throughout my career, we've shattered a couple of glass ceilings. For me, it's really about disrupting gender and class norms. It's also about delivering results every step of the way. And I focused on being a voice of truth and the arm of justice and an apologetic challenger to the status quo. I remember walking down the street around here somewhere. I was by myself, and this gentleman walked up to me, and he said, are you Letitia James? And I said, yeah. And he said, I like you. And I said, okay, thank you. I didn't know what he was going to say. And I said, oh, thank you, I appreciate that. And I extended my hand, we shook hands. And then he said, you know why? Okay, if you want to tell me why. And he said, and excuse my language, this is what he said. He said, because you shake shit up. And that shocked me. And I said, well, thank you for that, I think, but thank you. I've been using the law as a sword and as a shield every day for more than 30 years. First as a public defender representing individuals who are at their worst, their lowest point in their life. Then as an assistant attorney general in Brooklyn, then in Albany as counsel to the Corporations Committee, Corporations Authorities and Commissions Committee, and then as counsel to the Children and Families Committee. And then as a city council member, when I ran on a third party line, the Democratic Party rejected me, I decided to run on the Working Families Party line, and we won by knocking on doors all over Fort Greene and Clinton Hill, Prospect Heights and Crown Heights, knocked on thousands of doors, and we won that election. We got 80% of the vote. And then when I ran for public advocate and the individuals dismissed me, they said a woman of color could not win citywide, and in fact we did. And then as now the Attorney General of the state of New York, what propelled me was not, again, trying to break records or trying to be a trailblazer. It's because I just know how powerful the law is. And as someone who walked the halls of Howard University, which was the laboratory for the civil rights movement, I wanted to be in a school that transformed our country. I wanted to be in the same classrooms with Thurgood Marshall, taught everyone how to focus on social justice and challenging the law. I wanted to be where Eleanor or Holmes Norton was seated, and that's where I wanted to be, where people made a significant difference in our country. And in this position, as the Attorney General, I've had the opportunity to file a significant number of cases and serve subpoenas. As the former public advocate, we were at the forefront of transparency and grand jury testimony. We fought for body cameras for police, sued the city for deficiencies in the foster care system. We worked with others to create regulations related to preventing college sexual assaults. We focused on bad landlords. We got the pension board to divest from guns. We got the pension board to divest from fossil fuels. We just pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. They just pushed because I guess they were tired of hearing me. But we got it done. And the Office of Public Advocate made a difference in the communities that we serve. We settled over or resolved over 50,000 constituent complaints. It was the Office of Last Resort. We had an open door policy to anybody who walked through. And now in the Office of Attorney General, it's a whole new ball game because at the time I was suing Mayor de Blasio often when he got tired of me. And she said she's turning that damn public advocate's office into a mini Attorney General. And he was right. And he stood up and said she doesn't have standing to file lawsuits. And he did get a case that was fortunately limited our ability to initiate litigation. So when there was an opportunity to run for Attorney General, payback is you know what. And I said, no one will question my standing now, Michael, right? And so here we are. And so Mayor Bloomberg, watch out. But the stakes have never been higher. And I wouldn't be telling the truth if I didn't say it. It's been easy thus far, or that we've got an easy road that lies ahead, because we don't. Because as I mentioned before, everything is at stake. Our basic and our fundamental rights are at stake. And I recognize that as the state's Attorney General, I have an obligation to the people of the state of New York to enforce the law equally and to hold anyone and everyone accountable for violating the law. I also have an obligation to protect the rights of New Yorkers when their rights or their lives could be compromised, and that is exactly what we've been doing. But we're well equipped to take on whatever comes our way. And the Attorney General is really an incredible force with a lot of power. And I recognize that I am now the people's lawyer and am entrusted with safeguarding the legal rights of every citizen, every organization, our natural resources in every corner of this great state. The 1,800 people who I am proud to work with each and every day are dedicated public servants who work tirelessly to protect the state, and it's an honor to work with them each and every day. And as a result of all of their hard work, we've been able to stand up and defend your rights and defend our air and our water and our sea. Defend the rights of women, defend the rights of the disabled community, defend the rights of the LGBT community, defend the rights of low-income individuals, defend the rights of working-class people in the state of New York, defend the rights of students who unfortunately have been deceived, student loans against student loan borrowers, So it really doesn't matter who you are or where you live, if you're an immigrant or a lifelong New Yorker, if you're poor, if you're a billionaire, everyone must be treated equally and humanely. And everyone must have access to justice, the same set of rules that must apply to everyone from the President of the United States on down. Now, I know we have to get to some questions, but one of my issues, priorities, is really focusing on housing, because what I've seen all over the state is individuals who are struggling to hold on to their humble homes. And what I've seen also as a result of the crisis that we had several years ago, the housing crisis, is a concept called zombie homes. Zombie homes dot the landscape all throughout the state of New York, particularly upstate. These are homes that have been abandoned by individuals who can't afford to pay their mortgages, who were given mortgages during the housing crisis. When the bubble bust, these individuals were not in a position to hold on to their homes, particularly when their mortgages are reset. And so there's zombie homes all upstate and on Long Island and Westchester. So what we decided to do, again, following the tradition of the former Attorney General, is use settlement funds to invest in land banks and land trusts. So zombie homes can now be converted to affordable housing all throughout the state of New York. We have recently announced that initiative upstate in Buffalo and in Syracuse, and we look forward to announcing others as we go forward. We also, as a result of settlement funds related to environmental litigation, we've been able to set aside funds to remediate spills in our seas. And so I enjoy doing that. And we have been using settlement funds, obviously, to focus on bad actors and providing resources to individuals who unfortunately are not in a position to correct conditions in their homes. And the message really to bad actors, to bad landlords, if you're not doing right by residents in the state of New York, if you're abusing tenants, if you're defrauding homeowners, the Office of Attorney General will seek you out. We've already taken on a few, those who try to defraud homeowners. And as I mentioned, we've also announced this initiative to give grants to municipalities to deal with zombie homes. And earlier this morning, as I mentioned, we intervened in the bankruptcy proceeding in a building on the East Village where a landlord is attempting to evict all rent-stabilized tenants in his building. The second area we are focusing on is making consumers and working people, with making sure that they are treated fairly. Unfortunately, the federal government announced recently that they were going to change regulations in the consumer area and basically move away from consumer protections. And so they were going to use their agency, the consumer agency, to use the toolbox so that more products do not have to be tested and more products will be allowed onto the marketplace, and all of the protections that we have in place so that they would not harm consumers and or children, they would like to remove. We have filed an action to stop that reversal of any regulations. We also have reached, we've taken on corporations as well. We've reached a major settlement with, and I see a lot of you have jewelry, Kay Jewelers, and Jared, the Galleria of Jewelry. Fortunately, they were signing customers up for credit cards without their knowledge, and we settled some cases against them. We also settled cases, you ready for this, Walgreens, over allegations of fraudulent billing. We announced settlements and payments with energy service providers, ESCOs, that basically knock on your door or send you marketing material indicating that your energy bill can be reduced, or you would save money if you signed up with a company, only to find out that your energy bill increased and you did not save money. We also recently settled a case with a student loan provider that was deceiving students and not allowing them to reduce their student debt or let them know that their debt can be canceled if, in fact, they worked in public service or if they were teachers. We've also taken legal action against the pharmaceutical companies that we allege misled consumers about the dangers of their product. We are very much concerned about the opioid crisis, because one of the worst things being a public official is I've had to hold too many mothers and fathers and grandmothers before open caskets, children who have overdosed as a result of this opioid epidemic. And pharmaceutical companies and manufacturers and distributors who unfortunately turned a blind eye to this epidemic, to the effects of opioids, including but not limited to Oxycontin. It was supposed to be used for pain, but they unfortunately did not advise and inform individuals of the risk of addiction. Now you have a generation of individuals who are addicted to dangerous drugs, these opioids, all over the state of New York. And drug addiction, my friends, does not discriminate. It's an equal opportunity drug. So these are some of the works and some of the work that we are engaged in and that don't get the headlines, but it's an important function of the office and one that impacts families across the state. And so the Office of Attorney General, it's an honor and a privilege. I wake up each and every day just humbled walking through those doors, because it's really critically important that we stand up for vulnerable populations and that we enforce the law equally. Just recently, as you know, we are fighting back against efforts by this government to roll back Title X. We are also fighting back efforts against this federal government to rolling back Title IX, which is protections for survivors of sexual assault. Title X refers to family planning and reproductive health care. We are also taking actions against this administration to protect immigrants at a time when we are in the process of engaging in counting Americans, the census. As you know, for the first time in over 50 years, this administration has put on the form a citizenship question, which unfortunately has caused immigrants much fear. And as a result, I argue, will suppress the count. And as you know, our Constitution says that we should count every 10 years, not just Americans, but all individuals. So this goes against that position. So it's important that we make sure that we have an accurate count, because not having an accurate count will affect federal dollars, affect reapportionment, affect our representation in Congress. It has major, major impacts, and I would argue that it's nothing more than an attempt to suppress the count, basically transfer power from urban cities to rural cities. And so we have been joined in this litigation with 21 other states across this nation. Protect the count. That case will be heard before the United States Supreme Court on April 23rd. Lastly, as I close, because I know we want to get to questions, I just wanted everyone to know that Title 20, the rights of women need to be protected, and we need to protect Planned Parenthood, because this is nothing more than an attempt to close the doors of Planned Parenthood, the rollbacks in Title 10. So I stand with Title 10, and I believe firmly that this is my body and my choice, and that reproductive freedom should apply to all individuals. And we should not use our federal government to direct healthcare providers to clinics that unfortunately do not give you a full panoply of healthcare services at a time when it's needed most. So I thank you all for your attention, and I look forward to your questions.
Okay, so you just spoke about Title 10, and I'm not sure if everybody is fully aware of what Title 10 is, and just what exactly the Trump administration is proposing. If you could share just a little bit about that.
Sure. Title 10 is a federal funding program to provide reproductive services to women. And what this administration is attempting to do is to impose a gag rule, if you will, on providers and clinic providers in particular. And what this rule would do is divert funds from a lot of these clinics and healthcare providers some of the funds would go to organizations, religious organizations, that would teach you about abstinence and just saying no, and good things like that. It would basically close down Planned Parenthood and other similar programs that exist and clinics that exist. In addition to that, the regulations indicate that even providers could not even inform you about abortion. They could not mention the word abortion. Currently now, they can give you referrals, and that will be prohibited under this new regulation. And so 21 other attorney generals across this nation have stood up and basically said that it's a violation of the First Amendment. It's a violation of the Affordable Care Act, which basically speaks to this notion that we should have a non-directives when it comes to health care. And last but not least, it's in violation of the Administrative Procedure Act because it does not indicate the basis for a change in regulation. It basically is nothing more than an attempt to appeal to the religious right, and that's why we are standing up.
And what sort of, I guess, response have you received from your own supporters or even opponents to this, from this proposal?
Well, the opponents, I don't care about that much. I had a round table at my office last week, or maybe this week, last week, with healthcare providers, and I specifically wanted to know the impact of this regulation if, in fact, it went into effect. How would it impact their ability to serve women, and particularly low-income women? And it's important to know that Planned Parenthood and other providers don't just provide abortion. They provide health care. Health care is a right. Individuals who want to go for breast cancer screening, for screening or STDs, or just general health care as a whole. You know, as a former city council member in downtown Brooklyn, I can recall 3 young girls who were teenagers who knocked on my door. And they came from, intact families, but they had nowhere to go. And they were pregnant. And the two was pregnant. One, she said something was happening down there. That's how she described it. And I took them all to Planned Parenthood. They said they could not speak to their parents. They were afraid. And they wanted someone to hold their hand, someone that they could trust, and someone who was non-judgmental. And they wanted to speak to a professional about what they should do. So Planned Parenthood, their doors were open. And these young ladies did not have insurance, and they were dreadfully afraid. And they made mistakes. But it was important that if that gag rule had been in effect, and if I were a health care provider, I would not have been in a position to inform them about Planned Parenthood, to inform them about their options, to advise them. I would have had just urged them, close the door, and basically said there's not much more that I can do. And I just don't think that's right, particularly now, particularly since healthcare is a right. I believe in fundamental freedom for women, and I believe that women should have options and choices.
So sexual assault on campus is a very big topic. Big topic that, Michael, you have spoken to me. We used to talk about it a couple of years ago already. And I know that the Department of Education, you recently submitted a letter to Betsy DeVos expressing concern over the department's proposed rule for handling allegations of sexual assault on college campuses. Could you share with us just a little bit specifics about the department's initiative and how, in your opinion, these proposed rules will impact women and men on campus?
Yeah, they would basically change procedures with respect to how colleges deal with sexual assault. As the public advocate of the city of New York, we worked with Senator Gillibrand back then and other college professors all across the city of New York to put in place procedures and protocol on how to deal with sexual assault. It was during the Me Too, or we still are in the Me Too and Time's Up movement, and it's important that we have procedures in place, that there is due process in place, that there's standards in place, that there's protocols in place, and that women have a forum upon which to allege sexual assault, and that it's dealt with in a timely fashion, and that it's taken serious. The current regulations that are being proposed by Betsy DeVos would turn back the clock on all of that progress and make it more difficult for individuals to file allegations of sexual assault. It's important that we take it serious. Most individuals do not report sexual assaults on campus because they're not believed, because they're put on trial. And it's important that we sensitize individuals, and particularly college administrators, to the harm that it causes to women and to men, and that there be protocol and procedures in place. And this regulation will turn back the clock of progress. And so we've written a letter, and we are anticipating that they will roll it back, and that we will have to file another lawsuit, and we will be joined by other attorney generals across this nation.
So sexual harassment, we talked about, you just mentioned the Me Too movement, but there's a great focus right now about sexual harassment in government. And recently, I participated in the legislature's historic sexual harassment hearings that just occurred up in Albany. And a group of former staffers who call themselves the Sexual Harassment Working Group. These women were harassed, assaulted, and raped, and they're demanding changes to our laws, including to the severe and pervasive standard, including to laws about lobbying, that many times that certain perpetrators may leave government after something occurs, and then they become a lobbyist, and they're sort of still in the mix. And concerned about these bad actors, as well as classifying government employees who work in the state legislature as employees, as professional staff instead of employees. What are your thoughts on such measures to better protect, government workers, and would your office take a position on some of these proposals like you're addressing with the Department of Education?
So I support all of those positions. I have come out publicly. As the Attorney General of the state of New York, one of our functions is to serve as state counsel. So we represent and we have to defend all laws that are enacted by the state legislature. And it's really critically important that we have in place laws that basically change the standard with respect to the burden of proof on sexual harassment. And so as opposed to pervasive and persistent, we should change it to or instead of and. We should also make sure that there's consistent protocols across each agency, as opposed to there's different protocols from agency to agency to agency. It's important that we continue to have hearings. It took a lot to have hearings, and part of it is because the state Senate went from red to blue. And there is a bill that is currently pending, which is being sponsored by most of the women legislators in Albany, which would redefine sexual harassment and lower the standards and create and redefine certain criteria in the law to make it easier for women to report incidents of sexual harassment in the state legislature. And there was a time, and they have changed it. When I worked in Albany, there was a time when members and interns and staff would come together after work. It caused a lot of problems. They banned that practice. They need to do more because it doesn't apply to lobbyists. So we can obviously do more, and I am so glad that the Me Too movement and the Time's Up movement is now in Albany. And it's time that individuals in the state legislature who are mostly male recognize that they've got to change their behavior. But I'm really happy that we have elected more women to government, and particularly in the state Senate. And yesterday, we had a women's event that was sponsored by some legislators. We honored Andrea Stewart-Cousins for being the new majority leader, Crystal Peoples-Stokes for being the majority leader in the Assembly, and Andrea for being the majority leader in the Senate. And we honored I think it was Kathy Nolan, whose birthday was yesterday as well. But sexual harassment is a #1 priority these days in Albany. And again, it's because of this working group, which has a lot of work to do. And I look forward to holding the hearings, and I look forward to joining with them and giving them advice and counsel on the bills as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So I'm going to turn to a discussion just concerning leadership, since our Trailblazers program is about lessons of leadership. We talked about how you were a woman of many firsts, At what point in your life did you realize that you were a leader, a fearless girl, as you've called yourself, and you wanted to run for office?
It came about when I was in my teens, and I remember I had to go to, my brother had gotten into, he was arrested for stealing a bike, and my mother said, you have to come with me to criminal court, and I went with her down to criminal court, and I recall walking in, and I recall my mother asking a court officer, where's my son? And I remember the court officer saying, have a seat, we'll get to you later, be quiet, you know. And that bothered me a lot. That had a profound impact on my life. And then as I looked around the courtroom, all the defendants looked at me, and everyone else did not. It was at that time that I decided I wanted to be an attorney, so that no other court officer can speak to a woman in that fashion, someone who was simply looking for their son, who was innocent, and that no one would ever be disrespected again. And I wanted to change the look of the courtroom so that there would be more people, more women in that courthouse who were either court officers, correction officers, attorneys, and even judges. That's why it's an honor and a privilege to know Justice Kennedy, because we need to make sure that our government, our world, our society reflects the great diversity that's in this room and the great diversity that's in this nation.
Who has inspired you most? You talked about Shirley Chisholm, you talked about Thurgood Marshall, and how has that inspiration influenced you in your approach to leadership?
I think I'm admired most by Barbara Jordan. It was Barbara Jordan who presided, she didn't preside, she was on the committee who impeached Richard Nixon. And I recall her speech, and she talked about the Constitution. She would not sit idly by and allow the Constitution to be subverted. And that is particularly relevant these days. So it's Barbara Jordan. And, you know, Barbara Jordan was disabled. And I just admire her because she was the first African-American woman who spoke at a Democratic convention. And her speech was spellbinding. And and she was just a fierce woman and an eloquent woman. And she just stood up for her state and her district, Texas, and her love for the law, and how the law was really the great equalizer. That was her strength and her tenacity, and I admire her greatly.
I remember that speech.
Yeah.
It really was. It was very inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that completely. So, so let's just talk about leaders for a moment. And I think some may say that we have a sort of deficit in the leadership right now. But what do you think are some of the biggest challenges facing leaders today?
Well, no, so let me push back. There's a lot of leaders that exist. They may not have titles, but they're out there. And the attorneys general that I work with each and every day, we have been the first line of defense. We have been the strongest arm of government, I would argue, against this administration. We have stood up time and time again, standing up for the rights of Americans and standing up for the Constitution. I'm so proud to serve with them. I'm so proud to have individuals who call me of all different stripes, who ask me, Tish, can you challenge this? Or Tish, can you challenge that? Or Tish, can you challenge this? There's a lot of leaders out there. I saw them today over at that tenants rally that we had today, where a young Latino woman basically organized her tenants to engage in a rent strike against a very, very powerful landlord. She was threatened. She was told she would get evicted, but she stood up anyhow. She organized a press conference today. She was only like 5'3". But she was a powerful woman, and I just admire her greatly. And she, in my mind, is a leader. She is the type of woman that I look up to or look down to. And it's people like that I celebrate each and every day. I don't like people call me now and say, or even when I was public advocate and city council member, and they want to give me awards and honor, they want to honor me. And most of the time I reject it because I'm just doing my job. That's all that I am doing. And it's individuals who are invisible, the unspoken leaders that exist out there who really should be honored and who really should be celebrated. Elected officials, unfortunately, you lift them up and you hold them out to be like, and it goes to their heads. Being humble, walking with people, recognizing that they've given you the power, and that they can take it away, and that their vote is how they talk. That you should take your responsibilities and your duties very seriously, and that we should be honored and privileged to know that you're there to serve and not to be served. And it's unfortunate that too many elected officials these days are caught up in scandal and corruption, particularly in New York State. And we've got to do something about it. And part of it is just getting money out of the business of politics. And so Citizens United really should be overturned. That's a separate issue, but.
So when you started your speech, you spoke a little bit about just how we need to move ahead in the legal profession. How do you? We have a group of many people here who are leaders and are leading committees and sections and associations. How can leaders drive and advance the careers of women and people of diverse backgrounds so that we can make more than incremental steps in the law?
So we need to create pipelines. So I want to create pipelines for law students and for college students to enter into the profession of law. Two, we've got to leverage government. A lot of the law firms rely upon government contracts, and so we have to leverage those contracts and speak to elected officials about the absence of diversity in some of the major law firms in the city and state of New York. We've got to speak and inspire individuals and let individuals know that if you can make it, they can make it, and there's nothing really particularly different about you, but that they've got the power to move forward and to go to law school or medical school or whatever school and become leaders in their own right. And as Dr. King once said, just be the best at whatever you can be, and continue to lead. And continue to hold your head up high, and to let people know that you really can make the difference, and that the power really lies in our hands, and that we've got to use the power that's in our hands to make a difference each and every day. And if you close your hand, if you close your fist, and if you go behind closed doors, that's not helping anyone. If we all did that, then we would not be in the positions that we currently are. We've got to continue to push the needle on progress. And there's so much that we can do in this city. So many challenges that we face in the city and in the state. And it's up to us, all of us who are privileged, to move that needle. Each and every day, we've got to do it. So that's what I do. Just how could I make a difference?
So in your experience, in terms of thinking about moving and changing and moving along that needle, so what is the best way to build a coalition to advocate and affect change?
So, it's important that, again, as I stated earlier, we've got to get past artificial constructs. All of us are in silos, separate silos, and most individuals feel uncomfortable to step outside that silo. And if we recognize and understand what's at stake right now, people have got to step outside of their comfort zone and extend a hand to someone who's different and say, what can we do together? And understand the shoes that other person stands in. That's what we've got to do. I go to organizations all throughout the state of New York and all throughout the city of New York, and I usually don't get this type of diversity in a room. It's usually one or the other. And that shouldn't be the case. And so this should be an example to organizations all throughout the city of New York that we need to come together, that your rights are under attack and your rights are under attack. Whether or not you're white or black, it really doesn't matter. Your rights are under attack. We've got to join hands and stand up because we are in troubling times right now. We're in the midst of a constitutional crisis. If we don't raise our voice and if we don't work together, then we're bound to lose everything that we cherish. And to be honest with you, I sort of we all got too comfortable. All of us got too comfortable. We all sat back and said, everything's great. And then 2016 hit us like a ton of bricks. And now everybody's waking up. What can I do? I get calls from attorneys all the time. Can I volunteer, Tish? I have this idea. I have that idea. I have this idea. Everybody, has a great idea to make a difference. And that's great. It's fabulous. It moves me forward. It pushes me forward. Everyone, we've got to talk to one another. We've got to move some of these mountains that separate us.
Well, what do you think that are some of the things that everybody in this room here can do right now?
Well, you've got a number of committees, and so the Bar Association has been great. A number of recommendations with regards to changes in the law. There have been some recommendations with respect to litigation that we are exploring. I'm always looking for different ideas on litigation. And not only just in the area of, the retrenchment of federal government, but in the areas of antitrust, the areas of consumer fraud, housing, the areas of financial crimes. I'm looking for innovative and creative litigation. That's what I'm really looking for. I'm looking for individuals who can think outside the box. Cases of first impression. That's what I'm looking for. And so if you are one of those creative persons that's not too crazy, has to be grounded in law. Yeah, I've got some facts. Please let me know. And also, it's also very troubling. I'm seeing more and more hate crimes in our state. Hate crimes have increased. I consider myself, I represented the Lubavitch community in Crown Heights. Still do. I'm considered an honorary Lubavitch. I'm also considered honorary Irish. My name is Letitia Jameson. As I look forward to marching in the St. Patrick's Day this weekend. I say all of that to say, hate crimes. We need to reach out and find ways of combating hate. So I don't know if the Bar Association has a hate crimes committee, what we can do to address scourge of hate in our city and how we can combat it and what measures can be taken. In addition to that, I got to talk about crazy, all these ideas. Dealing with 2 schools, Fieldston School, I'm sure you heard the kids took over Fieldston, took over the administrative building, locked themselves in, called me. Now what do we do? And another school that the name escapes me at the moment that I guess during Black History Month they thought it was wise to auction off Black children in the classroom. So that, I don't know, somehow that was a lesson. So I'm dealing with those 2 schools on, 1, how to teach Black history, and 2, how to affect change at Fieldston to address some issues that the kids have. Issues like that I need help on. It's always great to call upon the Bar Association and say, I'm thinking about X and I would like some feedback. I need your opinion on this. I need your opinion on that. That's what I would like. That's where I need help at.
Thank you.
I see everybody like, oh, I've got an idea.
Yeah, there's lots of ideas, right? Okay. So our section created a champions committee, men advancing women.
What does that mean?
It means a way to engage men and
more men like Michael.
More men like Michael and Mark Berman, who's
Hi,
very,
Mark.
very involved with us, and Deborah Kay, our chair.
Okay.
And this is a committee which is devoting to, which we're taking off some drinks and dialogues and some other sorts of events. But you've been a change agent. You've been skillfully navigating the political landscape. What do you think we need to do to inspire more male advocates to move things forward and to accelerate change?
Oh, good question. Male advocates. I know quite a few male feminists. I know a lot of allies. I know a lot of them in government. There's one, like for instance, there's one particular council member. His name is I have to give his name. He represents part of Central Brooklyn. He was the first council member to open up a nursing center in his district office so women can nurse their babies. No one thought about that. But this gentleman came forward and said, I want to create a nursing station in my legislative office. And he came to me, he said, Tish, do you see any legal problems with it? And I said, no, it's amazing. And I said, what prompted you to do that? Yeah. His wife, of course.
Right.
But oftentimes, you know, people assume that most men don't have anything to contribute to the conversation. And they do. So we cannot minimize their contributions. We cannot ignore their contributions. We must include them. And they must continue to advise us. And we must build them up as well. I don't want to dismiss men. I want them to feel welcome as part of the conversation, because not all of them are, you know, bad people. Some of them are, you know, some of them have a lot to contribute, right, Michael? Exactly.
And you know,
Remind me of, as the public advocate of the City of New York, I passed a bill, which is now the law in the City of New York, focusing on equal pay for equal work, that it should be more than a slogan. In New York City, employers are now banned from asking about salary history. Part of it is because women earn less than men, and part of it is because feminization of poverty is real. And so there's a significant number of women who do not have pensions who are living in poverty. And so that question is now banned in the City of New York. But I had conversations with a number of men who said, Tish, we support your bill. And I said, yes, because this is not a woman's issue. And they said, you're right. They said it's an economic development issue, because we want our wives, our significant others, our partner to bring more to the table. And so if you approach it like that, they get it. The light bulb goes off. And I said, guys, yeah, this is not a woman's issue. This is a family issue. This is a women with children's issue. And so we've got to pay women the same salary as men so that they can contribute more to the economy. So all of the men, so there's a caucus in the city council called the Men Who Get It Caucus. It's a real caucus. And so the Men Who Get It Caucus, they voted for my bill, and I thank them for that. I also, and then I joined with a union, Local 1180, The women of 1180 are primarily administrators in city agencies, who the vast majority of them happen to be women. And they are significantly underpaid from their male counterparts. And they launched a lawsuit against the city of New York. The administration didn't want to settle, and they fought it in court. And more women raised their voices. And then ultimately, the administration, Mayor de Blasio, came to the table, and he settled the case because ultimately he recognized that it was wrong to do that. My last example is speaking to Police Commissioner O'Neill, who is very close to me, who I love dearly. And I went to speak to him because I was concerned about an increase in rape crimes across our city. And he came up with a wide range of recommendations. And Police Commissioner O'Neill is one who will be honest with you and will tell you when he is wrong and when he needs additional information. And he also has this real sensitive side. And if he were here, he would yell at me, but he does. And he has this amazing sensitive side, and sensitive to the issues of women, sensitive to the issues of injustice, sensitive to this notion of disparities, and to women who are harassed and are victims of sexual assault. He's implemented all of these measures to address sexual assaults in the city of New York, and he did it because he's a feminist. I applaud him for that.
I'd like to now open it up to the audience to see if you have any questions. Back there, please.
Hi.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Being used. So what comes to mind is right? When when they may not be
Ooh, good question.
Did you have more leeway as a public advocate for that than you do now?
Excellent question. So as a public advocate, the public advocate's office is, as you know, sort of amorphous. You can make it whatever you want. And each public advocate has led the office differently, from Betsy Gottbaum to Mark Green to Bill de Blasio to Tish James. Tish James put more of an emphasis on litigation, agitation, and legislation. Those three components basically can define my 5-year tenure as the public advocate. I passed more laws than all previous public advocates combined, beat them all. Filed more lawsuits than all previous public advocates combined. Some were dismissed, some went forward, some we won. And I agitated the hell out of people, probably more than most. I took positions based on my political philosophies. As the Attorney General of the state of New York, I am duty-bound to defend laws in the state of New York that I may disagree with. Example, Department of Corrections. Department of Corrections, sometimes you have to settle claims, and sometimes you have to defend bad actors in the Department of Corrections. And one of the things I've spoken to the governor about is, can we do something to mediate, mitigate all of the claims that we pay out? Because I don't want to defend someone who's a bad actor. And so he agreed. So we're working on a risk management committee to focus on the Department of Corrections, so I don't have to defend individuals who are engaged in bad acts. That's a major piece right now of what we're focusing on in the Office of Attorney General, too. There is, I'm trying to think of a law that recently that I had problems with. There's an executive order, as most of you know, where the Attorney General now has to investigate police shootings of individuals who are unarmed. Difficult. Very, very difficult. So we haven't had one case yet, but I've read about other cases. I've often asked myself, what would you have done? And it's difficult. Another case, there was a situation of a young boy who's autistic in Rochester, and the school system did not provide him with special needs services. He died. He walked out of a school. I believe they found him somewhere, and the school had reported him present in the classroom when, in fact, he left the bus and walked off, and no one even noticed he was gone. In the past, he had been indicating that he wanted to commit suicide, and no one provided him any services. Issues like that get me crazy. And so we had to issue a report to the Rochester School District. And I wanted to say, why can't we just sue them? And they said, you can't, Tish, you represent them. Cases like that. That's what I'm struggling with. But I will uphold, obviously, my duty and my responsibility. But what I'm going to try to do is prevent those hard questions from coming to my desk by engaging in risk management across the board.
Here? Oh, okay, sorry. Thank you for the plug, and I invite all the men to join the champions. We dearly need all your diverse views, and thank you for your service in advance. And would like to find out what Attorney General anywhere in the United States would you say that you respect the most, and if you could close your eyes and say, gee, at the end of whatever your term is before you go on to your next great step, you would like to see yourself be seen as or most like?
That's easy. Bob Abrams. He's my mentor. He calls me at least once or twice a week, sometimes twice a day, just to check on me, just to see what I'm doing, if I did X or if I did Y. He travels with me. He's introduced me to NAG, National Association of Attorney Generals. He shows me off. He tries to push me to join certain committees. He's a great guy. And he's the one that was responsible for the regional offices of the Attorney General. We have 16 offices, but 13 regional offices. I headed a regional office. And he created regional offices, and regional offices are individuals who are on the ground dealing with bread and butter issues, who are doing outreach and packaging cases. They are line attorneys, but they're embedded in communities. And it was Bob Abrams who created that.
He's your champion.
He's my champion, without a doubt. Without a doubt. There's no question. I do like Loretta Lynch, but she's my neighbor, so I'm biased.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. My question is, what is one habit or action or approach that you take every single day that helps you do what you do?
I wake up every single day with this fire in my belly. Walk into the office, I sue somebody, and then I go home. That works. And my weakness is ice cream. And so that's it.
You talked about the constitutional crisis, and we sort of live it every day in all of its various manifestations. I was wondering, and particularly the aspect of it with the issue of presidential immunity or non-immunity. And I was wondering if the AGs have any role in that debate, if you will, that's playing out, given the DOJ memorandum, et cetera.
Ooh. So there's been a lot of discussions, one with respect to immunity, one with respect to that DOJ memorandum regarding the inability to prosecute a sitting president, which is an advisory, a memorandum, a regulation, not a law. At this point in time, our investigation in the Office of Attorney General is limited to a civil subpoena. At this point in time, we're not pursuing any criminal action. And I don't know, right now, primarily it's the Southern District, and we all are anticipating a report from Robert Mueller. And right now, the issue is whether or not it's going to be published, whether or not it'll be subject to review, whether or not he's going to release it to the legislature, to Congress. Those are the questions that we all have at this point in time. My subpoenas were issued to Deutsche Bank and to Investors Bank based on the testimony of Michael Cohen. And we will see what it reveals, if anything.
One more last question? Anybody? Well, no, let's get Ray. Let's get Ray, yeah.
Thank you. My name is Ray Dorado, and I'm very happy to be here, and thank you very much for sharing all this time with us today. We appreciate it. I just to change things up a little bit, I wanted to ask you a little bit about preemption. In the wake of the CFPB that has been, I think, to some extent defanged. Would you say that whether it's New York, the New York AG's office, your office, or other AG's offices across the country, is there any potential that the AG's office may get more involved in some of the maybe prior agenda of the CFPB, given that they are not doing all that much these days?
Yes. So given the retrenchment of the federal government, the state and the Attorney General's office, we are stepping up in a wide range of areas, including consumer fraud, antitrust, et cetera. We are beefing up and working with the legislature in particular. And when I was up in Albany yesterday, I was reviewing their legislative agenda, and part of it is in the area of environmental, all areas where there is a retrenchment of the federal government. The state is stepping up left and right, and and now that the state Senate has turned blue, there's a flurry of activity. Yesterday, when I was there, they were talking about sexual harassment and the state budget. Next week they'll be taking on housing issues. I heard the following week it's going to be environmental. I heard another week it's going to be consumer protections. Every particular area that you can possibly think of, the state is going to step up in the light of the fact that the federal government is basically closed for business, not just in the area of consumer fraud, but in several other areas. And again, back to the gentleman's question, the Office of Attorney General, as you know, was also involved in closing down the Trump Foundation as well. It was used as a piggy bank.
I think our time is up. Thank you so much for joining us today, for your candidate.